Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of Natural Scotland Week. I'm so excited to have you with us today. We're going to learn all kinds of new things today, and we're going to have a little chat about what we've already learned. So first, if you haven't already got one, please make sure that you have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil ready, or maybe a whiteboard in case you need them during the lesson, just to write down things that you want to remember. So we're going to start today with some quiz questions. So let's put our thinking caps on. I've got mine on. Don't worry if you weren't here for lessons that we've had previously this week. Just have a guess at what you think it might be, and you can always watch the lessons on catch up later on. So our first question is, what is a native species? So put 2 hands up if you think it's a species threatened with extinction, or 1 hand up if you think it's a species that naturally lives in a certain area. And put your hand on your head if you think it's a species that's only found in one place. Remember, a species is things like varieties of animals and plants, right? And insects. Let's see, what do we think a native species is? Everybody got their thinking caps on. Have a think about what you might have a look at some of the words in the options and think if they fit. I'm seeing some classes have 1 hand up because they think it's a species that naturally lives in a certain area. 1 hand up, lots of 1 hands up. Having a good think this morning. Let's see if we're right. Well done. Everyone who said 1 hand up, which is most of you, you're correct. It's a species that naturally lives in a certain area. So native means they naturally live somewhere without human intervention, so without humans getting involved, moving it there. And there's a difference between that and the word endemic, which means only found in one place. So we were talking about species last lesson that are native and endemic. Let's have another question. Which endangered plant species is being grown for the first time ever in a nursery at the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh? If you think it's the Aran whitebeam, put 2 hands up. If you think it's the Alpine blue snow thistle, 1 hand up. And if you think it's the marsh saxifrage, put your hand on your head. We talked a lot about different plant and tree species in our lesson yesterday. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that one, you should definitely go back and have a look. Doing some really interesting work growing different plant species at the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh. Let's see, do we think it's an Aran whitebeam, a snow thistle, or marsh saxifrage? Oh, between 1 and 2 hands up. This is a tricky one. Because we talked about so many different plants yesterday. So I think the majority of the answers include the Alpine blue snow thistle. Some people are between the Aran whitebeam and the Alpine blue snow thistle. That's a mouthful. Shall we see if we're right? Oh, all of these are endangered plant species that are being grown in the Scottish Plant Recovery Project at the Royal Botanic Garden of Edinburgh, which is probably why they sounded familiar. But they've managed to grow marsh saxifrage for the first time in a plant nursery in a clever system called a cascade. So if you've missed it, you can watch the recording of our lesson from yesterday to find out more. So What do we want you to do this week? This week, during our lessons, we'd like you to find an area in your grounds or local area, like maybe your neighborhood, woodland, or a place you like to play, where you could make a place for nature and make a plan to how you will create that place for nature. You can send your plans to us to be in with the chance of winning a copy of The Man Who Planted Trees by Jean Giono and some wildflower seeds to plant in your grounds. My colleague Nicola is going to put a link in the chat to a resource to accompany this activity, so you can read all about some ideas of how you could go about doing this. And today, during today's lesson, we're going to learn what a wildlife corridor is and why they're so important. And we're going to learn how to use the Nature Discovery Map Scotland to plan wildlife corridors that can include your school. But first, we're going to have a little chat about what living things need. What do you think living things need to survive? A pretty big hint on the slide just now. There's 3 things that every living thing needs. Without one of them, they have a pretty hard time surviving. These are things that we need too as people. There's some answers coming in. Some people are saying food, water, and shelter. Food, water, shelter, a place to live. And obviously, everyone needs these things in different quantities. We don't all need the same amounts of food and water. They're all very correct. Yes, all living things need food, water, and a shelter or a home to survive. So if we want to support nature, we need to make sure that all of these things are available for lots of different types of animals and plants. We probably won't be able to provide all of that within just your school grounds, though, and often animals and plants need to move around during their lives. So we need to make links to other places that animals and plants can get food, water, and shelter when they need them. And we can do this by creating something called a wildlife corridor. What do you think a wildlife corridor is? There's a picture of one on the slide just now. Have a good look. Looking down from above on it. What do you think that might do to help plants and animals and insects? Kind of an interesting looking thing. You notice it's over a busy road. Someone in the chat has said it's a thing that helps animals cross human things. There's a very human thing underneath that wildlife corridor, isn't there? It's a very busy road, and that would be quite the barrier for small animals to cross. And plant seeds probably wouldn't make it across that either. And then someone else is saying it's a safe place for animals to cross. Yes, we have safe places for humans to cross busy roads too. So a wildlife corridor is exactly that. Oh, it's a space to help animals to move without contact with humans. Someone else is saying, well done. I like the without contact with humans part. That's very important because sometimes that isn't what animals and plants want, right? We can cause damage that way. So a wildlife corridor is a designated area, a specific place that connects wildlife populations that have been separated by human activities or structures like this busy road. It's a vitally important thing to make sure that animals have access to food, water, and shelter because they need to move around in a big area. They can't always get all their food from one small area all the time. So today, we're joined by Ellie Carlisle from NatureScot, who's going to show us how we can use the Nature Discovery Map to plan wildlife corridors with our school grounds included. Big thank you to Evie for joining us, today and for sharing her experiences. Haley, are you there?
I'm there. Good morning.
Hi. Hello.
Are you okay? It's good to see you all. I'm Ellie Carlisle and I am a education and engagement officer from NatureScot. But what I'm going to talk to you today is about one of the projects I work on. Probably one of my favourite projects I'm working on at the moment, which is we've developed something called the Nature Discovery Map Scotland, and we're going to talk about how this can be used to help you plan how your school grounds connect with nature. Why does our school matter to nature? Because, you know what, it's just a little playground. But those little playgrounds really start to add up because in Scotland, we've got approximately 4,750 hectares of land covered by school grounds, which is about 0.06% of Scotland, which doesn't sound a lot until you start thinking about it in the terms of that's about the size of Dundee, which is the fourth largest city in Scotland. So that's a big area. And just as a comparison, our natural nature reserves cover about 1.5%. So it's not a small amount of area. And also it connects lots of different places together. It's a centre of the community. So it's a really important place to start thinking about. And from the other side, you know, you will have talked about this a wee bit already, but why does nature matter to your school? Because being out in nature in green spaces is really good for your brain. It's really good for your body because you've been outside and being active. And if things are good for your brain and your body, it's really good for your teachers because students who have been outside and engaged their brains and bodies outside are more likely to come in and learn really hard with their teachers. And that's what your teacher wants. So nature's really important to your school community. In fact, it's probably as important as having a decent school building. Now, we're going to have a think about our school grounds in general, and then we're going to have a look at an example. So what are our school grounds made up of? Now, our school grounds are, funnily enough, made up mostly of buildings and tarmac. And the blue section there is buildings and hard surfaces. So that's car parks, hard playgrounds, paths, and the buildings themselves. The green next big section is what they call improved grassland. So that's your playing fields, that's football pitches and areas where you run around and play. And then the smaller sections come into things like arable and horticulture, which means places where you grow things, whether it's vegetable patches or flowers or designed areas. And some schools have other things in them. So there's 2.84% is woodland in schools around Scotland. We've got rough grassland, which is unimproved grasses. So where it's a bit rougher, could be meadows, could be moorland. We have heath, which again is moorland. We have a very small amount of schools have something called supralittoral sediment, which is the little patch in between the high tide line and where it becomes full land. So it's the area that gets sprayed and occasionally covered by the waves. So these schools are right on the edge of the coast. And then we've got 0.01% of schools have got bog, bless their cotton socks, which is probably not the best for playing football, but really great for wildlife. So what I want you to do is just for a minute, decide what you think the three main things your school grounds are made of and write them down in the chat. Thank you, Dr. Connor. Downing, Dumfries and Galloway. It looks like at the moment, most of our schools have very similar sort of makeups of buildings, concrete and tarmac, and hard ground areas with some grass. And some schools are unlucky enough not to have very much grass, and other schools will have a little bit more depending on where they are. So that's good. So at the big scale, all our school grounds are pretty similar. But when you start looking a bit closer, schools don't all look the same and they all have different things they can do. So we're going to look at a school that I visited last week in Inverness, and we're going to use that school as our example to start talking about what we're going to do to connect this school better with nature. Now, here is our primary school. This is Drakey's Primary School in Inverness. It is like many other schools. It has buildings, it has hard playgrounds, it has a car park, and it's a really big playing field, a really lovely one. And then it has some trees around the edge. And this particular school is in the suburbs of Inverness, and so it's surrounded by houses. And what we're going to talk about now is how can this school become more connected with nature? So we're going to look at the bigger picture. Now, this map is something I pulled up from the Nature Discovery Map. It's sort of a layer we can put on. So we're using aerial photography to show what it is. And then I've put in a layer to show where different types of green spaces are. Now, this purple line right in the middle is our primary school. Now, to the left of that, you can see there is a very large golf course. And the pale green sections are the heavily mowed, heavily fertilized areas, and the darker green sections are a mixture of trees and wild grasses. You can see that there is 2 different colour greens to the right of this school. These are different play areas, some of which have got trees in them, some of which are all grass. And you can see that there are 3 other primary schools, there's one just at the top, which you can't see as clearly, 3 other primary schools within that area that potentially they could work with to join up and make larger wildlife corridors. So you can see now that this primary school is linked to the area around it. And if you look very closely, you can also see that not only have you got these big areas of green space, but all of the houses around it have got gardens. And in these gardens, you can see little green patches, and these are also lines of trees between houses. So it isn't in a desert. There are already things connecting together. And if you know the area, which I do quite well, you'll understand, but when you get to the very right where these fields start, that is the edge of Inverness. And so there is a potential for connecting this school all the way to the outside of the city. And that's something which they are very keen to do. So their big question, and your big question, is how are we going to connect this school better with nature? And so the first thing they decided to do was look at what they had already. And we went out into their school grounds, and we used a mapping app where they could actually look at what nature features they have in their school already. So they found they had a cluster of trees right at the bottom. They've got a polytunnel. They've got their bins, and they've got some bug hotels and trees. And they'd had a look at what they already had. And this meant they could start thinking about how they could connect better. What was the big areas which they needed? They mentioned that they had a big area up at the top, which was all grass, and we didn't measure it all out because it was becoming quite large. So that is all unimproved grass. So they realized they had some options. And then as part of this, they took some pictures. And as you can see, they've got some lovely trees. They've got some wildflower planters they've already started. They have bug hotels around the trim trail, so they've made a good start. And they have a very beautiful polytunnel for their outside growing space, which I think is rather fabulous. So they had some areas where if they looked closer, they felt there were areas they could improve. So by mapping their area and looking at the data they already had, they realized there were things they could do differently. And they came to the conclusion that there were areas like the one in the picture, which was built for growing beds, which perhaps they could grow more wildflowers to connect the trees and gardens on one side of the school to the trees and gardens on the other side of the school. In the wilder tree area, they wanted to think about whether they could put in a pond or a bog garden, where they could start to connect the streams, which are in both of the parks, together, moving somewhere where the insects could move between. And perhaps they wanted to have areas where they could talk to about having the grass mowed a little bit less often so that they could have more flowers for pollinators. And these were their first, and this was an afternoon session, and these were their first ideas, and they were going away to think about it. But what they actually asked was whether you guys could have a think for them. So you've seen our school, and you've seen what they've already got. And I would really like it if you could give me some ideas for this school. So could we have a minute where you just give a couple of ideas of what you would like to see in this school if it was your school? Well, I like the idea of a mini forest. Veg garden to go with the polytunnel would be an excellent idea. Some more bug hotels is again very useful. These are some great ideas. Wildflower meadow, that would be great, wouldn't it? Small pond, I love this. Bird feeders, yep, definitely. They've got some trees to hang them in already. Just going to go back. Frog spawn and, oh, tree swing, I like that. That's a great idea. Just going to head back to here. There we are, big picture. Birdhouse, these are fabulous ideas, thank you. So these are the sort of ideas that our school came up with, and you've come up with some more. I hadn't even thought about putting the frog spawn into the new pond, so that's excellent. And this is another way we can look at it. So what they decided to do was where they had their trees, they wanted to try and connect as far as they could by making sure the trees were not just in one area, but spread out throughout so that birds, insects could use them as a bridge across their school grounds towards the park. Again, the same, they wanted to make sure that everything was done in strips, not just in clumps. So there wasn't just one area in their school grounds which was dedicated to wildlife. It was spread throughout so that it could be used as stepping stones or a bridge across to the next area of green space, which is a big deal because their school actually almost cuts it off. There's only two small corridors on either side which can be used for wildlife to go between. So that was a really important idea to put together. Making sure that they had bug houses, not just in one corner next to the nursery where they are at the moment, but trying to pull them so they had one next to the car park at the front of the school as well. So trying to ensure that there was lots of space where they could join things together. Now, the other thing they talked about was they were very worried about where they were going to get the money from this. And a big thing to note is that actually being nature positive doesn't have to mean big. And in fact, most of the really good projects that work successfully are quite small to start with. They don't have to cost a lot of money. They just need some effort and thought about how you do them. So things like making sure that if there is an area of trees where you might see bats, that you could have a bats box in there. You can make bird feeders from recycled goods and they come out really well and the birds will use them. So that would be one way of looking at it. Clumps of wild flowers and areas of wild flowers do not cost a lot and only need you just to look after them. And ponds need a lot of physical energy, but they can be again put in a fairly cost-effective way if you've got a group of you working. I've just put a pond in, so I am aware how hard they are to dig the hole, but they are very, very fun. So you don't have to be thinking big. So you need to be thinking as your class that you actually can make a difference, a big difference, without having to make a huge project where you're redesigning everything. It can happen a little bit at a time. And that is a very important thing to remember because you guys can make all of the difference. And if you do need more money, or if you do need to plan bigger, you are capable of doing it. You can start thinking about ways that you can identify how you make that difference. Some of you will have eco-school committees, and your eco-school committee can start working on this. And this particular school are going to use their new nature map, where they're looking at what features they have in their playground, and they're going to use that to start building a plan. They're going to use the data and the evidence they've collected to justify why they need to do some fundraising and why they're going to do what they're going to do. And they're talking about taking it to parent council and actually getting the parents involved in fundraising if they can. And I'm sure them and you will come up with lots of other ideas of how you can do this. And what they are doing is using something called the Nature Discovery Map Scotland to do this. Now, this is a bit for your teachers because I want you teachers to be able to see that we have lots of resources for how you can use this more in lots of different ways. So I've just put this up so your teachers can have a look at it. It's a mapping resource. So you have layers of maps like the aerial mapping I put up earlier with green space, but we also have some apps where you can use those for mapping your school grounds if you want to. So I would love to hear from any of you around this topic. Katrina, I think, are you ready to have me back, to come back, or?
Hello. Thank you for that. That was really cool. It's amazing how even tiny projects can help create some more spaces for nature, and joining them all up can be a wildlife corridor. That's brilliant. I was thinking the projects you were going to suggest were going to be something really big, but actually, you know, this all sounds very achievable.
Oh,
I'm gonna have it.
Little waves make big differences, don't they?
Well, exactly. And I hope that all of the pupils listening have some really good ideas. In fact, we might have a couple of minutes for a couple of questions.
Oh, yes,
If
please.
anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, or if you have any ideas of things that you want to do in your own school grounds that you'd like to share with us, that would be very cool too. While you're thinking of your ideas, I'll just have a quick recap. So today we learned what a wildlife corridor is and why they're so important. And we learned how we can use the Nature Discovery Map Scotland tool to plan a wildlife corridor that includes your school. So has anyone come up with any ideas that you think that would suit your school while we've been listening today? Or does anyone have any questions about what a wildlife corridor could look like that includes your school? Someone says they would like to clear out their polytunnel to see what they could grow.
Yeah,
You're very lucky to have a
polytunnels.
polytunnel. That's very cool.
They are. Polytunnels are so useful in Scotland, aren't
Mhm.
they? Because it takes us a bit of time to get things set off because our weather isn't always as predictable as other places. So it's really useful to have that to start things off, whether it's vegetables or flowers.
That's right. A polytunnel can really help if you want to grow fruit and veg because it can give you extra time. Anyone else have any ideas? Or any more other questions? What would you like to grow in your polytunnel, Mrs. Lumsden's class? Have you got any ideas of things you might like to grow? Maybe fruit and vegetables that you can try with your school lunches, or maybe you'd like to grow flowers? Oh, they say they also have a nature garden that's been a bit neglected, so they want to look into that. Give it a little bit of TLC.
Brilliant. Have a look at what you've got there because it may look neglected to you, but it might look perfectly formed to your wildlife.
That's very true. That's true. I know it's important not to clear out all the dead looking stuff too early because it's homes for insects. So my garden always looks a bit scruffy in the spring, but it's because I leave all the dead stuff.
Yes, mine too, for the same reason. My favourite thing to grow in my polytunnel at the moment is I have been growing insectivorous plants,
Ooh.
ready to get into a bog garden sort of situation. So I have some pitcher plants and other things which are growing. They're very cool. They look a little bit creepy, but I'm I do like them an awful lot. So insectivorous plants eat insects,
They do.
which is the other reason I like to keep them in my greenhouse.
Mm-hmm. They'll help get rid of the bugs that might harm the plants that you want to grow. That's right. Another class is saying they'd like to replant their planters and make more bug houses and also clear out their polytunnel. Oh, lots of classes have polytunnels. That's cool.
It's great, isn't it?
What
This
would
is
you
the
like to
time of
plant in
year.
your plant? Oh, sorry.
This is the time of year to be cleaning them out, isn't it?
It is. What do you think you might want to plant in your planters? More bird houses, bird feeders, and bug hotels, and create a vegetable patch. This is Crichton's class. Any vegetables in particular you'd like to grow? Maybe there's something your class hasn't tried yet and they'd like to
More
grow some to try.
wildflowers.
Wildflowers, very important.
Excellent.
It's good to plant flowers near your vegetable garden too, because they're good for pollinators, which you need to grow vegetables and fruits.
You know, we always have the urge to clear away things like dandelions and nettles, don't we? And they're just
That's
really
right.
important for particularly caterpillars.
That's right. Humans tend to want to make their gardens very tidy and neat, but nature is not very neat and tidy.
So keeping a couple of patches of nettles where they're not going to get in people's way is quite important if you want to see butterflies later in the year.
Really is. Mrs. Crichton's class said they'd like to grow carrots, tomatoes, and potatoes.
Nice.
Hmm. Oh, we have a question. Is there a version of the map for homes as opposed to school grounds? Because this participant says they home educate and would love to use the Discovery Map to improve their garden, which is their school grounds.
You can use the main map for your school home. You can zoom in, you can zoom out so you can see the corridors and how they fit together. The tool licenses are only for schools at the moment, but that might change in the future. So you can use everything except the apps. And I'm happy to show you around if you want to email us and let you have a look at it.
That's good to know.
The map covers the whole of Scotland. So in the future, you'll be able to look at your school and other people's schools and compare and see whether you're doing better than them.
So
But it
when you say
also
in the future, does that mean you're developing the map tool
we are
even
developing the
more?
map, and as people add their information, as people add
Mhm.
data, so this data, once it's been approved, will be available to all schools and all people across Scotland, so they can see what we've got as a nation, but also as a nation, all our schools have got together, but also how their school fares against other schools.
So schools adding their own data into the tools
They're
is
going to
really
school
helpful.
their own data in is what's going to build our
Yeah,
data sets, so we can see what features they have and how they're improving, because you're going to be able to, the good thing is this is something that can be repeated, and you can have galleries of photos showing how your school grounds have improved through the years, which is going to be really exciting to see.
that's really a valuable tool to have.
I think so.
Good to
And
know.
we have my favorite bits. There's a swipe tool, so you can see what it used to look like and how it now looks.
Ah, so really, this really suits the measuring element of eco-schools, because if you want to look to see how your projects have benefited your community and your school grounds, you can use the swipe tool to have a look at what it was before and then see what a
Absolutely.
difference you've made. That's brilliant.
So yeah, it's a school for you to see what you've got and where you want to go with that,
Hmm.
which is really, really exciting to see how it works out.
Are there any further questions? I think we've got time for about one more before we move on. You've all got some really interesting plans, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about them. If you want to tell us how you get on with these plans, we'd always love to hear from you.
Absolutely. I'd love to see and hear what's going on as well.
And yeah, and that's whether you're home educating or at school. We always love to hear what you're doing for the environment. So please do get in touch and share your projects with us. If you think of a question after we finish, you can also always email us that as well, and we'll do our best to get an answer for you. Because sometimes that happens, you have a chance to ask a question, you can't think of one, and then as soon as the lesson finishes, you're like, I should have asked that.
We all do it.
Exactly. I think someone else is typing at the moment, so we'll just wait for that question. And then we'll finish up our lesson. But if you do think of something, please do let us know. And if you want to show us your projects, we always love to hear from you. It was a thank you, not a question. All right then. So we hope that you feel inspired by today's lesson, and we would like you to use what you've learned to use NatureScot's Nature Discovery Map to work out how your school grounds or your home could form part of a wildlife corridor. My colleague Nicola is going to share in the chat a link to where you can find all of the resources that we've used in today's lesson. Thank you, Nicola. The next task is to fill in the gaps. And we will be looking forward to seeing all of your amazing work during the week, because on Friday we have an assembly and we'd love to share all of your work with everyone else to see to share all of your ideas during Friday's assembly. So please make sure that all of your work is sent in by 2 p.m. on Thursday if you would like to be included in our Friday assembly. So please share anything that you're doing for Natural Scotland Week on social media too, and we'll share your posts from public accounts at our assembly. And we'd also very much value your feedback on our live lessons. Any ideas you might have of topics you might want to hear more about, or ideas on how we can improve our lessons. So please complete this very short feedback form to tell us what you enjoyed and what you would like to see more of. And that includes pupils and teachers. So my colleague Nicola has just shared the link there too. And our email address is on the slide just now if you think of any questions or you think of anything you'd like to share with us. Tomorrow, join us for our assembly, including a quiz on what you have learned this week and a big display of all of the work you've sent in to us. We really hope you can join us. We always love to see you. Thank you, Ellie, for joining us today and sharing the Nature Discovery Map and for telling us all about wildlife corridors. It's been a pleasure to hear you today, and thank you for answering all of our questions as well.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
So we'll see you tomorrow for our assembly, but that's all we've got time for today. So bye for now.